I just need to record this. Oh, we're recording. Good. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Kathy Markov and I'm your facilitator for today. I love doing these workshops because I get to cover topics that I think are so important. My entire career has been about working with leaders, working with frontline employees, helping to train and coach and counsel in terms of good workplace behavior and some strategic development of organizations so that people are able to really thrive in their work and organizations are able to reach their goals. And in so much of the work I do, I end up talking a lot about working types. And if there's one area that I think I have particular interest and knowledge and expertise, it is in helping people understand working types. So it was Patrick Lencioni who wrote a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He has a companion book which talks about how do you overcome those dysfunctions, and he says 2 things. One thing is that people need to have some vulnerability with one another, and there's a lot of ways to do that, but he also says we need to understand each other's working types. So this has been a real foundation of the body of work that I do and the contribution I've made to organizations, and I only have an hour to share with you something that usually takes me 8 hours to go through, but I'm going to touch on it. And what I hope is that at the end of this, you're able to have an understanding that working types have a big impact on communication between coworkers, that you know how excuse me, I don't know why, my tongue's tied today, generational diversity impacts communication, and to learn strategies to be able to work with everyone. You know, we are multifaceted beings. We're like an onion, and I'll talk about that later. There are different layers to us. But for me, looking at working types and really the perspective that we've gained over our life experience that can be expressed or understood through looking at generational diversity is really key to understanding yourself first. We'll talk about that, self-awareness, but also to understand who you're interacting with. And frankly, you need to take responsibility for your own behavior. And we can't change anybody else, but you sure can change your approach, your style of communication, to be able to meet the other person where they're at in order to effectively move forward and accomplish the goals that you set out for yourself and the organization. So let's get going. The greatest distance between 2 people is misunderstanding. And again, studying working types and looking at situations through different lenses is the key to lessening that. For me, the definition of communication is a messenger sending a message to a receiver with mutual understanding. That means both the message sender and the receiver understand the message in exactly the same way. And what is interesting, think about that. In your closest, most intimate interpersonal relationships, how often do you truly get to a sense of mutual understanding? This is something to think about because this is much easier said than it is done. So I want to share with you actually a story. So I was hired actually, maybe how long ago was it? 12 or 13 years ago to manage America's Job Centers of California in San Luis Obispo. And so I was the director of the program. And of course, we hit the Great Recession of 2009. Okay. And if I can ask people, please, to turn off, to mute. There we go. The Great Recession of 2009 hit, and we were flooded with money. So I started off with about $750,000, and within 6 months I had almost $3.5 million, because this was what was happening. We were really pumping money in to help people who were unemployed. And I had the opportunity to hire people, and I hired a guy named Bill. Bill was the finance director. Now, he was a CPA. He was very well qualified for his job. But Bill and I had very different working types. So I'm the more flowery person. I'm on the face of the organization. And actually, Bill was behind tracking the numbers, making sure the reporting was correct, making sure that we were in compliance with the contract, but also the GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles. And that wasn't an area of expertise for me at all. I didn't know much about it, but I just knew I had to get this done. There were all these job seekers that were out there depending on us. So let's look at emails, because this was a place where the differences between my approach and Bill's approach really showed up. So my emails would be very flowery. Hi, Bill, how are you doing? I need this, blah, blah, blah. And then his would come back bullet points, or I'd ask a question, he'd say yes, or I'd ask a question, he'd say no. This was frustrating for me because I, thought he was mad at me all the time. And so when we got flooded with all this money, really the pressure was on. And I was working on a budget and I needed Bill's help. And, I knew that we were sort of at this stalemate in terms of how we were communicating with one another. And I started to really reflect on how he was communicating with me. And actually, he was answering my questions, but there wasn't anything else, right? And so I thought, maybe it would go better with Bill if I changed my approach. Like, why do I have to put in all this flowery stuff or end every email with, I hope you have a nice day? That makes me feel good, but it's probably making Bill, sick to his stomach. So I needed him to help with this important budget. So I wrote this email and it was literally just bullet points. Bill, I need bullet point 1, bullet point 2, bullet point 3. Please get it to me by the end of tomorrow. And I was scared because this was a very different kind of email that I had ever sent, a very different kind of communication that I had ever had. And I felt really uncomfortable, but I wanted to see if this working type thing had anything to do with it. So I was scared, but I hit send. And you know what? Bill replied within 30 minutes with everything that I needed. It was very effective. And this is what I want to talk to you about today, because we need to be self-aware enough to know when to put ourselves and our own desires aside. It made me happy to put smiley faces and have a great day on an email. But in fact, it wasn't not only what Bill needed, but it broke rapport between the two of us, right? So this is what's very important to consider. So Bill was really happy with me. And after that, I continued to communicate in a manner that I thought he would appreciate. And he started cooperating with me. This is the thing that I learned that was so valuable about how to work with Bill. And it was because I was willing to meet him where he was, to give him what he wanted, and not to communicate with him in a way that I wanted. And again, at first it felt very uncomfortable, but once I started to realize that, things went a lot better. And this is something that I have learned very deeply. I have another woman that I work with. She is an HR director of one of my largest clients, and she's lovely. In fact, this woman and I, we get together sometimes and have lunch. We've actually gone and had a glass of wine together, and things have gone really, really well with this woman. And guess what? Our email communication, it's bullet points. It's very much the way I communicated with Bill. So this is something to think about because I have learned to use this and be very effective working with people. This is one of my favorite people. This is Stephen Covey. And Stephen Covey says, next to physical survival, the greatest need of human beings is psychological survival. to be understood, to be affirmed, to be validated, to be appreciated. And what I realized is in my communication with Bill, right, I was telling him, I don't understand you, right? The way in which you're communicating with me is not good. I didn't validate the really cut and dry, straight and to the point way that he was wanting to communicate. And when I began to show appreciation of that in the way I was interacting with him, everything changed. So to make our diversity of working types a benefit and make them positive in terms of finding better solutions for our common issues and to reach our goal and working in the mission, we really need to understand how these things work together. So, you know, it never was quite like this with Bill. We were very different. We had different expectations and responsibilities and approaches, but we were able to work together very, very well because we understood one another, we affirmed one another, we validated one another, and we appreciated one another for our differences. So we developed that rapport, that all-important sense of rapport. Now, rapport is key to any kind of communication. Rapport is very fragile, right? You can fall out of rapport immediately with people, but you can gain it back. So we were able to develop that rapport, a good working engagement with one another, and be very, very productive. So one of the keys was me understanding and guessing, really, and I'll talk about that later, what was Bill's working type, and trying. I was willing to try to modify my approach to him to be better at interacting with him. So the thing is, this rapport is not always there. And as I said, it's fragile. But when I learned what to do and I could get back on track with that, I mean, I made mistakes, right? Things went much smoother with Bill. And guess what? I was happier at work too. My boss was happier with me, and everything was better because we were following the platinum rule. The platinum rule is do unto others as they would like to have you do unto them. You know, the golden rule is do unto others as you would like them to do to you. But we're turning it around a little bit. You know, the platinum rule is do unto others as they would like to have you do unto them. This is a key thing. I think that if we did that as a society, we'd be in a much better place. And this takes really self-awareness. So Tasha Urich, who wrote a wonderful book, she said the biggest opportunity for improvement in business, at home, and in life is self-awareness. So it took a level of self-awareness on my part to know first, what is my working style in contrast to Bill's, and then to make changes in how I approached him. I couldn't expect that he was going to change, but because I had this knowledge, I took the risk to do that. And that's really the best thing that we can do. We can't hope that other people change or get mad at people because they're the way they are. We need to be willing to be self-aware and think, well, what can I do, right? I was much more effective and happier and much more appreciated even by my boss when I was working well with Bill. So, return on investment for being self-aware. You develop compassion for others. I began to understand Bill's perspective and appreciate that he was a data kind of guy, right? Yeah, things were black and white to him because he was dealing with numbers, whereas me, it was like a colorful rainbow. So understanding that helped me develop compassion for him because I needed that black and white numbers focus in order to be successful at what I was doing. Self-awareness helps you understand your preferences in different situations and other possibilities in contrast. Right? So when you're self-aware, you realize, oh, that's my need, but it may not be the need of the entire group or of that other person. And then you can start to look at what is possible. Your self-awareness gives you a chance to respond versus react to challenging events and people to keep you from doing things that you might regret. Right? And we'll talk about that later. With everything, we need to stop and respond rather than react. And our working type is there with us whether we're aware of it or not. But sometimes it causes us to react to situations that actually could be more effective if we saw a way to approach things in a different way. And by being self-aware, it puts you in the driver's seat. Self-awareness really is power. So there are things that we can do to set ourselves up for success. First is become more self-aware. Second is develop emotional intelligence, which we're having another class on that, and to employ that platinum rule. Let's dig a little deeper into self-awareness, because when we're talking about working types, it's really getting down to actually it tiptoes on the edge of personality, right? I have seen these working types in my children when they were babies. So these things are pretty inherent to who we are. So I talk a lot about developing what I call your third eye. Your third eye is your self-awareness. And it's kind of built on a couple of different things. First, it's being authentic. Yes, we need to know who we are, what we want, what we think, what we need, and that's being authentic. But if that's the only perspective we're coming from, we come across as egotistical or narcissistic or self-centered, right? That cannot be the perspective we're always coming from. The next is being empathetic. Empathetic is when you demonstrate understanding for other people. You may have a similar experience, you're very open and warm and listening, but if that's the way we are all the time, you know, we look like a pushover, particularly if we're in leadership, like, oh, you don't have an opinion of your own, you're just being very empathetic and going along with what everybody else says. So we can't just be that. Super rational, to be honest, that's kind of where Bill was coming from. These are the rules and they have to be this way and we do everything this way. Everything's black and white. Well, everything isn't black and white, but to look through that perspective, there are certainly times when to be super rational is very, very important. Right? There are rules. We do have to adhere to certain norms of behavior. There are things that numbers and data tell us that we need to listen to. But if we're always coming from that, we come across as being cold and uncaring. So really, our self-awareness helps develop this idea of being a little bit in the observer position. This is what I mean as the third eye. How can you mold being clear on who you are, what you want, what you need, being understanding and caring about other people, but also fitting it within the rules of what's possible? This is really developing that third eye, and this is when I think we've achieved self-awareness. Some people call it process observation. So you're you in any given situation, but you have the opportunity to sort of step back and look at what's going on. Not just, you know, I mean, we can tell a lot by body language and the words people use, but what I'm talking about today in terms of working types and generational diversity is putting another layer on that onion, because the more information we can glean from the situation, the better we can sort of guess perhaps at somebody's working type and approach them in a different way, kind of like I did with Bill. Or we can kind of, not to stereotype anybody, but think, oh, they might be thinking about this differently because their life experience is different. When we become that observer, it puts us more in the driver's seat and we can try things. And if it doesn't work, we try something else, right? But we, with this knowledge, need to be willing to try different ways in order to be more effective. So I want to start with working types. This is nothing new. In fact, the theory that we're going to talk about, you've seen this before, I would venture to guess. And the first person who noticed what I like to call these patterns of approaches in these working types was Hippocrates. Hippocrates was an ancient, it's like 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece. He was a doctor. right? We know Hippocrates' work because he was the one that came up with the Hippocratic Oath. This is the oath that all doctors take when they get their MD license. Basically says, I will not do any harm. So he had a big impact on our Western civilization, how we organize things, and he noticed a pattern. So he would have these different people come in to, get some help from a doctor. So they'd come in and they're not feeling well. And he noticed that there were 4 different types of people that would come in. There were some people who would come in, they'd be very businesslike. Hey, doc, I got this. I'm running a fever. I got a cold. I got this. What do I need to do? And the doctor would say, oh, okay, well, I think you have this. You need to go take this, rest this way, do this. Thanks, doc. And they're out. Very businesslike, right? They took charge. They told the doctor what it was. He told them what to do, and they went out and did it. Then there were another group of people, and they would come in, and, they're not feeling well, but it's almost like they want to sit down and have a beer with the doctor. They're, hi, doc. Oh, I'm sorry to bother you. How's your family? Were you at that jousting the other day or whatever? I'm making this up, but they would be very conversational, almost like they wanted to be friends with the doctor, right? And eventually, after 15 minutes of conversation, it would come out what it is that's going on with them. The doctor would tell them what to do. They might want to have a little conversation about it. So you mean that, I should take this medicine with my breakfast or my lunch or my dinner, any kind of food. There's very conversational. Then there was another group of people, and they would come in, and they would have like a list of everything that had happened. Well, it's happened at Tuesday at noon, and I had this go on, and then by 3 o'clock on Tuesday, this happened, and in the middle of the night, they would have like a list of times and events and what happened and blah, blah, blah. And then the doctor would say, well, I think you've got, a cold or whatever. I want you to do this. And they probably question the doctor a lot. You're telling me that I have to take this medicine with food? I want to know, what's the evidence that tells you that that's going to work? How do you know for sure that that's what I should do? And how do you know for sure that that's what I have, right? They want data. They want information. By the way, that's who Bill was, right? Do you see me in it? I was the one wanting to talk all the time. And there's a 4th type that Hippocrates noticed. What Hippocrates noticed was that there was another group, and they would come in and they were very nice, and they were conversational a little bit like our talker before, right? But they were very cautious. They were concerned, very, very concerned about what they might have. They would tell the doctor all of their symptoms. The doctor would diagnose it. They would just be very unsure. Are you sure that this is it? Are you sure that's going to work for me? The doctor realized with this group that he needed to provide a lot of support and confidence building and listening to their concerns to make them feel comfortable moving forward. So what I'm hoping you can see is these 4 very distinct type of patients that would come in to see Hippocrates. Now, he labeled them, right? He documented this, and he called them the 4 humors. Well, as you can see from this, it was blood, phlegm, bile. These are awful names for us. So we've come up with, in our society, a number of different types of inventories. We call them inventories or little tests to discover what type people fit into. So there's a whole range of different approaches. From there's something called the DISC. There's one, you have an animal type, there's one, even the Myers-Briggs type indicator is related in this. This woman, Marita Latour, she and her, I believe it's her mother, wrote this book. I love this book. This is a fascinating book. And in the book, it actually has a chart of all the different types that use Hippocrates as the model. And my guess is that some of you on this workshop have taken something like this before. There is no surprise that there are 4 different types, and they fall into these general categories that I'm going to talk about. Even if you look at something like Gallup and Strength Finders, when I've done the research, digging deep into what Strength Finders is, even though there's 32 different strengths, they all fall into these 4 categories. So let's talk about it. Before we do that, those of you that are in this workshop, I want you to consider something for a minute. I want you to stop, take a breath, and I want you to clear your mind a little bit. And what I want you to do is imagine that you are experiencing a live play performance. Now, I know in COVID times, don't we wish we could go, but just imagine it. And you get to play any role in this production that you want to, okay? You're part of the team putting on the play. You're involved over time. So the question I have for you, and the first thing that comes to your mind is the right one. Would you rather be the director? Would you rather be the actor? Would you rather be behind the scenes doing the technology, building the sets, maybe selling tickets, working on the money aspect of it? Or would you rather be an usher, bringing people into the theater and making them comfortable? So again, there's no right answer or wrong answer. It just is an is. But it's an is that makes a difference in terms of knowing our own working type, but also knowing what other kinds of working types are out there. Because when you have that knowledge of knowing what's possible, it gives you the opportunity to mold your behavior in a way that can build rapport with others and move things along. So again, are you the director, the actor? Are you behind the scenes running the business, setting up the sets? Or are you the usher? This is a basic way of looking at what the types might be without taking a little test. So let's look at the working types. Now, this is the way I look at it. So working types are divided into people that are interested in the big picture and people that are interested in the details. People that are focused on the task or more focused on developing a relationship. Now, by the way, there's none of these focuses are more important than the other. They're all vital in order for people to come together and accomplish good work together. We need somebody or some representation from each of these in order to really get to being a high-performing group of people. So let's look at what this means. In my terminology, when I teach this, I say that people who are task-oriented and focus on the big picture, they are I control. Now, they're dominant, direct, and candid. I love to use culinary analogies. So Gordon Ramsay from Kitchen Nightmares, you know, Gordon Ramsay, he's I control. He comes in, he sees what the problem is, and he directs people, right? He's trying to save a restaurant that's going under, and he is not interested in, you know, he doesn't care if he hurts people's feelings, for example. I've seen him come in and the husband is cooking and the wife is out front. The wife is kind of snarly with the customers and the guy is not a very good cook. So he'll come in and say, you can't cook, but you have a great personality. You should be in the front of the house, and say to the wife, you're mean and nasty, and you keep telling him how to cook. Why don't you get in the kitchen, show him how it's done? So, you know, now these people, sometimes they cry, they get upset. He doesn't care because he wants to turn that restaurant around. And you know what? He does it. He's dominant, direct, candid. That's the I control, right? The next one, and that's the director, by the way. The next one is what I call the I communicate. The I communicate is persuasive, influencing, they're friendly, focus on the big picture and the relationship. The perfect example of that is Rachel Ray. She's so bubbly and cute and fun, right? And you can see her. She says, I don't care about making, you know, the best food in the world. I want it to be something everyone can enjoy, get people together, breaking bread together around the table. So this is our Rachel Ray. She's the perfect I communicate. Then we've got the people called I care. They're conscientious, considerate, reflective. And by the way, let me go back. The I communicate, of course, they're the actor. The I care are the usher, right? They care about making sure people are happy, making sure people can see the theater, making sure people are all where they need to be and everybody's in a good place. This is very much like Anthony Bourdain. Now, I loved him, and it's interesting, you know, he was a high-powered chef in New York, and he wrote a book called Kitchen Confidential, which revealed all the secrets of the very challenging work environment in a commercial kitchen. So it's not at all surprising that he wrote that book, because what he demonstrated in that is that his preferred working type is really this I care. He didn't like that chefs yelled and screamed at each other. He wanted to make it so it was more of a caring work environment. So very interesting. And then of course he became very famous after that book and had that program on CNN called Parts Unknown. And if you watch that show, it's supposed to be a food show. It's really a travel food show. And over the years, Anthony got more and more interested in just getting to know the people, right? His biggest joy was to be invited into somebody's house and to be served things he didn't even like. But he would eat them because he cared about them. He didn't want to insult them. He wanted to make sure they were happy. And so he would do that because he was I care. Then finally, we have the I count. I count people are systematic, they're steady, they're logical. And I don't know if you guys, the America's Test Kitchen, they have a big television show now. I've been following their books for years, and the originator of that was a guy named Christopher Kimball. I believe that he's retired now. Yeah, you love the Kitchen Confidential. I can see a chat here, and yes, I agree that I miss Anthony Bourdain, but I also miss Christopher Kimball. So Christopher Kimball, you know, these books that he produces, he used to have this magazine that we subscribed to for years and years and years. And what they do is they say, okay, we're going to find the ultimate recipe for chocolate chip cookies. So he would take the chocolate chip cookie recipe and he would, as the original, and then make like 10 different versions of chocolate chip cookies using butter or coconut oil in one or Crisco in another, or put more flour in, put less flour in, put more sugar in, and then he would do these control studies, tracking everything. And at the end, he'd come out with, this is the ultimate chocolate chip cookie recipe. Or he would be looking at what's the best easily accessible olive oil. And then he would test all these olive oils that you could get at major grocery store chains and then tell you, this olive oil is the best for the dollar. This is the best for sauteing. This is the best for salad dressing. So everything was counted, right? It was very methodical. That's the word. So this is trying to give you an idea of the different working types. And again, you know, the I count would be the behind the scenes person of the theater, making sure the sets fit, the costumes fit, the numbers worked, you know, we're selling enough tickets at the right price, all the details, right, of getting it done. The director is the I control, the big picture, and just making it happen regardless of, yeah, people might not be happy, but, you know, we have to have a fire drill because it's something we got to make sure everybody can do. The I communicate, the actor, right, being up on stage, promoting the situation, and the I care, making sure everybody is coming along in a happy way, thinking about process. I want you to start to see these. And the question I have for you is to begin to see this kind of thing in your life. And what I will say to you, those of you that are here, if you want to email me, I can send you an inventory that will test this out for you. But this is really a very important thing that I can show you. So the question is, okay, how does each of these people like to be, how do we identify them? And how do they like to be treated? So I'm going to show you some funny pictures. Yeah, these are me. This is me in my I control mode. right? How do you know that? So look at how I'm dressed. I'm wearing a suit, kind of neutral colors. I have a smile on my face, but I'm telling people how they should be doing things, okay? Here's me in my I communicate role, right? Look how I'm dressed. I've got bright colors on, big smile on my face. Look at the desk. Sticky notes all over, lots of color. This is usually the way, at least a female I communicate shows up. But even in males, you can start to see, how are they dressed, right? Are they dressed in a business suit and a tie, even though they're working in Santa Cruz in the middle of the summer? Likely they're in I control, but you know, they're more casual. Maybe they're wearing a Tommy Bahama shirt and you know, they're more colorful kind of person. I had a boss, a male, who wore Tommy Bahama shirts all the time and walked around with like a pink notebook for breast cancer month. Okay, so well, was an I communicate. Here's another one. You know, this is our I care person. I cares are probably the hardest one to identify because they come across as kind of neutral. So they might wear more clothing to fit in. So if they're in an environment where everybody's wearing a suit, they might have an outfit that is suit-like, but probably much more comfortable. So I had a woman I work with who was an I care, and she was beautifully dressed every day. And it was a professional environment where we all wear suits, but she never had a tailored suit. She wore these beautiful, a little bit flowy, long jackets with sort of palazzo pants and soft colors. She just wanted to blend in. So she wanted to look professional, but she was comfortable, right? And here's the final one. This is our I count. This is a funny picture, right? But this is not uncommon. They're likely to wear sort of business attire, but not want to be as formal as the I control person. Often coming with their tools, where they're you know, their calculators and pens and papers, ready to take notes. They're prepared. Look at the desk as opposed to the I communicate, right? You're going to see things cleared off, very organized, right? So this is just a visual representation, because my experience is you can start to identify these people, right? With the I control, you can almost feel them walking in the room. With the I communicate, you can hear them walking down, right? The I care, they're going to come in and you may not notice them, but they're going to notice how you are. They're going to reach out and say, hey, are you okay? Can I help you? Can I do something? And the I count people, they're going to be ready, prepared. They're going to ask a lot of questions. Sometimes that can be off-putting. People need to learn to be effective in their working type, but we need to value every single one of them. And often the I counts bring such amazing data and help to the situation. It just needs to be done in a way that is palatable to everyone. So there's a difference between the intent and the impact, right? This is another level of self-awareness. We need to be aware of our intent. Like Bill's intent was to just answer my question, but it was driving me crazy. Likewise, my intent was to be happy and bring joy and be nice to Bill, but the impact, I was driving him crazy. So it's really important to be self-aware and not be afraid of changing our approach to be more effective. And in doing that, we need to refrain from judging others, because we need to believe that to get the best out of people, we have to believe that the best is there. And there's no one working type that's better than the other. All of them have a place, and all of them are valued on a team. I love this quote. It says, if you think because you understand one, you must understand two, because one and one make two. But you must also understand and. And I love that, because the and is the connection between one person and the other. So the key is to understand the and. And I realize I should have gotten rid of the slides. I'm going to go pretty quick because I have some other slides. Let's look at our I control person. So if you surmise that someone may be an I control, how do you interact with them? You want to get to the point quickly, Focus on the task and the expected results. They're big picture people. So how can you appeal to the bigger picture, the bottom line? They're your bottom line person. Share progress on your goals. What actions have you taken? The solutions that you have. Avoid the details, right? Argue facts, not feelings. They're not going to appeal to, oh, that makes me feel bad. No, argue the facts. Be prepared to answer what questions. We have our I communicates, right? It's really important to focus on developing a relationship. Emphasize the fun and the human element. Express enthusiasm. Relate to the need to share information. Tell stories, experiences. Be prepared that the first 10 to 15 minutes is going to be chit-chat. But I guarantee if you allow that to happen, you can get right down to business later. So you want to focus on the big picture and what's possible. These are the people who dream about things. Don't get bogged down in the details. Be prepared to ask her who questions. Who's going to do this? Who is this going to impact, right? Our I care people. You want to be relaxed, be agreeable, show empathy and understanding of feelings and their need for caution and reservation. Our I care people have a lot to do with showing us what could possibly go wrong, which is very important, right? We can get carried away with our I control and our I communicate people and go off in tangents that are not going to be effective. It's our I care and our I control who can bring us back down to the reality of the situation. Do some reflection, acknowledge the emotion and the impact on team relations. Use the word we, and create a plan with written guidelines. The I care are going to need some follow-up with written guidelines. And be prepared to ask her why questions. They're going to want to know why we're doing this. The final one, of course, are our I counts. And this is where, these are the detail people. So the more detail and data, information, and facts that you can provide, the more rapport you're going to build with our I counts. Approach the subject logically, systematically. They're not going to respond well to concern about a lot of feelings. You want to be prepared to be accurate and precise when you're presenting information and in an orderly manner. Don't get too personal. You're probably not going to sit down and have a long, lengthy personal conversation with an I count before you get down to business. Just get down to business and be prepared to answer some how questions. So these are some tips, and this PowerPoint can be uploaded to the YouTube YouTube video of this presentation. But I want to clarify for you that none of us are purely one style. So I shared with you, my primary style is I communicate, but I have a very strong I control as well. My weakest is the I count. And this is important for me to understand that. So from the first point of view, not one of us is purely one or the other. We are a blending, and it's important for us to understand what's our primary, what's our fallback or secondary, and then which are our weaker styles, so that we can do a couple of things. One, I know for me, my strongest suit is my I communicate, but my default is I control. And when do I go into I control? When I'm under stress. I am not an effective I control if I'm reacting to a situation, right? My I control, I'm very grateful for it. It helps me get focused and move forward, but I need to be careful that I'm not slipping into that when I'm stressed out. Likewise, my I count is very weak. So I know I need people like Bill around me, and it's key that I form good rapport with them because it fills in my gaps. This is the best teams are when you've got people who fill in each other's gaps, okay? So this is really important. And when I talk about, how do you react when you're under stress, these can be your intensities, right? I know that I can be bossy when I'm under stress. Or if I get really excited about something, I can be too much, too enthusiastic. I've been told more than once in my life, you're too enthusiastic. That to me is like, what? but sometimes it can be overwhelming. And so it's very important to be self-aware. And I have found myself, as my career has developed and grown, and as I've gotten really extraordinary opportunities, I'm working on a project right now, an international project, where I play a role where I am not in the lead, and I am not to be this rah-rah person. I have specific skills that come to the table, and I'm being hired just to do that. So I need to be self-aware enough to pull myself back and just do my job. And that's okay, right? There are times for that. Additionally, I want to be aware of identifying what I think the person's primary, forward working type is. And then, as I've said, be willing to change that, right? But what if you make a mistake, right? What if I approach Bill with these bullet points and it didn't go well? Well, that's feedback for me. There aren't mistakes, we get feedback. And then guess what? I get to try again, right? Yoda said, do or do not do, there is no try. Well, I just said the word try, but you got to realize, you can't say, well, I tried with Bill and it didn't work. Well, then you didn't do it, right? So what do? You try something else, and eventually something will start to stick. The important thing to think about is your actions speak louder than words, and you can be the role model, really, of how to work effectively with all kinds of people. And what a great thing that is, right? But you got to walk the talk. So there's the march of time. So our working type is one thing. And as I told you, very early on, I identified in my daughter, she's a very strong eye control. She came home from kindergarten, snapped her hands and said, hey, everybody, be quiet, to her little brother. Turn off the cartoons. I'm sitting at the dining room table. Mom, you're sitting next to me. You have to help me with my homework. And I said, oh, honey, what's your homework from kindergarten, first day kindergarten? She said, I need to color, and you need to sit here and watch me color. Okay, but that's how she was. My son, on the other hand, he is more of an eye count and an eye care. He sits back, he watches things, he remembers things, he tracks things. He's in engineering school at San Diego State. Am I surprised? No. I saw that when he was an infant. And so that carries through our life, but our life experience based on, our generation also is another lens to look through. So let's move through this. I know we have 10 minutes, but we've still got time to make some progress on this. What I'm trying to get you to understand is that these lenses are a perspective. So what you see depends not only on what you look at, but also on where you're looking from. And we need to remember that cross generations, that there is as much to learn as there is to teach. And this is important no matter if you're young or if you're, like myself, an older worker. I have so much to learn from the younger generations. And with that statement, what I think is helpful, if youngers, realize that it's great to learn from people who've gone before. So let's look at generations real quick. This is how it's defined: a group of people with a shared history, core beliefs, and common biases. As a result of these events and conditions, each generation has adopted its own generational personality. And, there's a lot being said. This was from Time magazine, I think in 2018, the millennials, the me generation. I want to rest assured that if you look through time, that this idea of a me, I guess it was 2013, me, has been every generation as they're coming up. Look at 1976, the me decade. I think it's something maybe related just to youth, focusing on yourself. So millennials, I don't want you to feel bad. This was happening to the baby boomers. It probably was happening to the traditionalists. It's just part of the cycle of it. And there'll be another generation coming up behind that you may look at and say, they're me. So just to put it in perspective, currently in our country, there are 5 generations at work. Now, I'll expand this in a little bit, but there are traditionalists, baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, Generation Z. You can find yourself on this. And let's go through these really quickly. Our traditionalists, they might be your, I know that's my mother's generation, might be your grandparents' generation, right? They are very dedicated and they're seeking job security. We got the baby boomers, and I know there's a lot of attention on that. I just listened to a podcast by the woman who wrote Okay Boomer. It's a book. I don't know if you knew that, looking at a lot of the research about boomers. But boomers are optimistic, and they believe that hard work and education equals success. Generation X is very self-reliant. Right? And they want to invest in portable career skills. In my experience, they're the first generation that really thought about having many jobs in their career. So the traditionalists would like get a job and stick with it for 20, 30 years. Many of the baby boomers, I see this in the organizations I work with, get a job and hang on. But Generation X realized that, you know what, if I'm going to move on, move up and have an interesting career, I need to be investing in myself so that I have skills that could move me in different areas. Our millennials, tech savvy. Their motto is multitask or die. Now with these mottos, don't get offended. Just know this is what the research is saying. I'm basing this on research about the generations, right? But multitasking became a really big thing with the advent of technology and people who really had a cell phone in their hands by the time they were in junior high. So multitasking became very important. Our Generation X people, they're entrepreneurial. And they're looking for work-life integration. From a tech point of view, they're truly the digital native. You know, the iPhone was not even available until 2007. And if you look at a lot of the research on many different things, 2007 was a pivotal year in society, technology, work practices, and this group of people, you know, they were really small when that sort of happened. They're digital natives and they are entrepreneurial. You know, during the pandemic, both my kids who came home from college at home, you know, they got a job in the gig economy. They started doing DoorDash, and my daughter is trained as a personal trainer. She started getting out there and through social media and word of mouth got personal training clients that she would work out virtually, and it was great, very entrepreneurial. She's written blog posts, written her own website. So this is very indicative of a Gen Z and wanting to find that work-life integration. Okay, currently these are the generations in the workplace. And what's very interesting, and we talk a lot about baby boomers. In some ways, Gen Z is almost lost and silent between the huge baby boomers and the huge millennial generation. But this is moving. Look, 35% of millennials are in the workplace. And the Gen Z, my daughter just graduated from college. She's had her first job. You know, so, and the traditionalists, you know, are retiring, baby boomers. Honestly, this would look different if it wasn't for the recession of 2009, which kept a lot of baby boomers in the workplace. But as you can see, having an orientation to generations at work ends up being really important. So with all of that, I want to tell you that there's another lens to look at this, and that is the micro generations. And I have to admit that although my birth date is right on the very last day of the baby boomers, I actually don't really identify as a baby boomer. And I'm not really part of Gen X. So I fit in what's called the cusp, or a micro generation. So it's very important that we look at that, these generations can overlap from 5 to 8 years. It's really, you know, a self-identification, but we want to be sure that we're not stereotyping or categorizing people, because this idea of a cusper or a micro generation is someone who might fit in at the end or the beginning of one and not really identify or fit perfectly into that. So this is important to keep in mind. We're multifaceted, multi-layered, but it is interesting to see where you might fit in. So here's a couple things to know with relationship to this. Number one, these categorizations of generations are an American phenomena, and they're one piece of the puzzle. We talked about working type being another, cultural background, personality, birth order, and this idea of, the cusper, these people that fit in between. So I mentioned this before. We people, we're like onions. We have many, many layers, and we don't want to, again, stereotype anyone, but to identify some of these patterns with the intent of learning to develop rapport and work well with people is really key to our success in the workplace. So success is not found in what we have achieved, but rather in who we have become. And if you start to think about these things this way, the question is, can you create a work environment or contribute to a work environment where people feel engaged? They feel understood. They feel like what they're doing is meaningful. They feel like they're optimistic, things are possible, people care about them, and that they're part of something, right? What I didn't realize, I was the director of that program and functioning from my I communicate and my I care. At the end of the day, my finance director, Bill, was feeling left out. He wasn't engaged. He didn't feel part of it. So when I started to approach him in a way that was more respectful and understanding and appreciative, and by the way, we were in different generations, he lit up. He started to engage. So we want to think about this. I love this quote. People will eventually forget what you did. They will eventually forget what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And in order to do that, we need to be aware of reacting at the moment, but take time to respond in a way that considers the multifaceted, the onion of every person. We need to think before we act. And we need to be willing to set aside time to meet, to discuss the issues, to explore our differences, to encourage that, okay, Bill, you and I are very different, but we're going to respect one another, and to take personal responsibility for your own behavior. Be curious about others and find out what makes them tick. So I've got about 3 more slides, and here we go. To be a good partner, use complementary strengths. Bill began to be my best asset, and I actually hired someone to replace him that had the same personality type and skill type, right? Because I realized I appreciated and needed that, and I was much better prepared to work effectively with that person. Find a common purpose, be fair, trust and be trustworthy. These 3 things, what is the reason that you're there? And find that common purpose and how you can both be fair and trustworthy. Accept people's faults, your own included. Be forgiving with one another. Don't be selfish or competitive, and work to get to mutual understanding always, right? We can even get to mutual understanding on agreeing to disagree. So here are some best practices for working types. You want to listen and observe, right? Give the benefit of the doubt and show empathy, even when someone approaches you in a way that you really don't like. But then it's time maybe to meet and to talk about the differences and to get to mutual understanding of how you want to interact with one another. Affirm your strengths, but beware of your tendency to become ineffective. I shared that. My best strength is my I communicate. But sometimes I can be a very, very ineffective I control, and I can overdo the I communicate. And it's something I've had to learn to work with. Extend your repertoire, meaning be able to behave in different ways for the sake of improving relationships, like responding to people's email in a way that you think they would appreciate, not just the way you would appreciate. Show appreciation for different working types and generations. They might offer you a vital perspective that you hadn't thought about. And develop your ability to analyze the team. The best teams are made up of diverse people. Why? We want diverse perspectives, and it's more than just, the color of our skin or the language we grew up speaking in our household. It has to do with the perspective that we bring, the different working approaches, the different generational lens that we have. And when we have this diversity of perspectives and ideas, and it's facilitated in an environment of appreciation and respect, we always come to better solutions than if one person was taking over from other people. So develop the ability to analyze your team. If you're on a team meeting, yet only one person is talking, the formal leader or the person who's the most extroverted and has the biggest mouth, this is not a team, right? So notice that. And then what role can you play to help people to get to a point where everybody's able to share their own perspective? So with that, that's the end. You know, you can ask any questions you want, either in the chat or in the, you can unmute. I'm here for you. I love this stuff. I can geek out on it. I've got hours and hours and hours, and we can go into more depth, but this was just an hour, and I don't know if you have any questions. So it's been my pleasure, and I welcome any questions you might have. Any questions? What I'm going to do is I'll just formally end it. I'm going to stop the recording, and then I'll stay on the line in case anybody wants to ask any specific questions. I would love to know what your working type is, and